Hey, my friends, how you doing? So we're like going through all this crazy time, and I thought, why not do something fun while I make some content? And so I thought I would throw myself a little Halloween party. So got my costume on, got my decorations up, and I thought I would just chat a little bit about some tarot stuff and questions that have been asked over the years that I haven't really talked too much about, or things that I have come to think about differently over my life as a reader. So I don't know how long this get up is going to be feasible, because it's warm in here, but we'll do our best. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to sort of put some videos out that might be entertaining for folks and that might, just take your mind off the world at large right now, because I feel like we need it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was reversals. So someone actually asked on a video recently, under what situations or circumstances do I use reversals and not? And it's changed for me a lot over the years. When I first started reading, I absolutely read reversals because all the books said you should. And so I did what the books told me to do. I read reversals. And then I would go back and forth, partly just because I didn't like the way they looked in a spread. You know what I mean? Like, I just sort of thought, oh, an artist, even in a deck I don't necessarily love, an artist put effort and time into this, and to sort of have it be upside down just didn't make sense to me, like, artistically. So over time, I would go back and forth, but what really changed things for me was Robert M. Place's. Actually, it's right here. Oh no, it's gonna fall. I've talked about this book many times before. But this is Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination, and I only get the title right when it's in my hands. But what he talks about in this book, and what I thought was super revolutionary, was that if you read with 3 cards and no reversals, you actually wind up with more potential combos than you do reading reversals, and 1 card per spread position. So he uses 3 cards per position, and 3 cards per position, and no reversals. And will I find the page? Anyway, he does a little math that actually shows how many more potential combinations that you would have reading that way. And I won't waste time on that now, but that really convinced me to stop using reversals entirely, and it really changed the way I read. Boy, am I sweating. It really changed the way I read. And so I do that now. And then when I started writing Tarot on Earth, and when I started working with pip decks, I really did start using reversals again, because I felt like without a picture, I needed more subtlety than I felt like I was getting. And so I did occasionally use reversals with pip decks as I was learning, and I put that in Tarot on Earth. So if you actually read Tarot on Earth, you'll see that I do that pretty consistently throughout. And that helped me kind of transition. But I have to admit, like, even now, after a few more years of reading that way, I don't ever use reversals at all, under any circumstance. I don't need them. I feel like I get everything I need excuse me, without needing reversals. So I don't read with them anymore, at all. I just use 3 cards per position, and I tend to read a lot more like Lenormand with tarot now. So I do spreads of like not like a 9 square box, a 9 card box is the word I'm looking for, and excuse me. And that has definitely, like, given me so much more color and so much more shading and so much more context and information than I ever got using reversals. So someone's walking their dog outside. And I can't see because the blinds are closed, because I don't want anyone looking in and seeing me like this. Although I'm making a video, so I guess that's kind of dumb. So yeah, I don't use reversals at all. I think if you use them, that's great. I think if you don't use them, that's great. There's really no right or wrong way. I read reversals because I was taught that was the right way, and I really don't do it anymore. I don't need it, and I feel like 3 cards always gives me what I'm looking for. So that is how I feel about reversals. So never use them anymore. Always use at least 3 cards, and that's how I do that. And it was a long journey. It took me a while to sort of get to that place. And that's where I am now. And who knows? I mean, things could change. I could go back to reading reversals all the time. But at the moment, I don't really see myself doing that. So the next thing I was going to talk about was like keywords and why I don't like keywords, but why it doesn't matter if you do. But what I am going to do is I'm going to pause this video. I am going to put on some normal clothes because I'm sweating like crazy. But I did think this would be fun. And then we'll continue chatting. So hang tight and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. So isn't that always the way for you to do this? Like you go to the costume party and you spend all your money on the costume and you wear it for 20 minutes and then you're done, because I do that all the time. Iced coffee is here, homemade now, because that's how we're living in this world. So the next thing I was going to talk about keywords and why I don't like them, but it doesn't matter if you do. And what I have been thinking about as I've been thinking about this concept and sort of why I don't like keywords. The reason that I personally don't like keywords is that I'm very linguistic. I'm very wordy, for lack of a better word. And so words stick with me in a way that pictures, or words speak to me in a way that pictures don't. And so personally for me, when I see a keyword on a card, it's harder to finesse than an image. So when I look at Pamela Coleman Smith's Three of Swords, I don't necessarily see what most people see in that card, or I can see past it, because actually the image itself is really neutral when you look at it kind of objectively. You know what I mean? Like there's no bleeding, there's no suffering. It's just it's a state of a moment. And I always talk about neutrality anyway. But the esoteric title for that, and the word that's on Crowley's card, is sorrow. Sorrow is a harder thing for me to see past than that famous image of the heart with the 3 swords in it. But as a reader, you know, like some people don't mind that. Some people prefer the word because they can finesse the word a bit more than the image, for example. And so they're both different systems, and I think they're both valid. It's just that for me as a reader, I prefer to just work with a picture or no picture, like the pip decks, which is why I started moving in that direction with pip decks for so long. Because, and I can go back and forth between pip decks and Rider-Waite-Smith, and I feel like I have a solid, and I don't feel like, I know I have a solid enough foundation that it doesn't really matter what system I'm using. But if there's a keyword, it really trips me up, and it's harder for me to get past that. But it is they're all mnemonics. You know what I mean? They're all devices meant to help you understand the meaning of the card. Pamela Coleman Smith's drawing was a mnemonic for the esoteric title, Lord of Sorrow. The image Frida Harris painted for the Thoth deck is not a mnemonic. It's an experience. It's a feeling. It's more like a pip deck. Although I would say that there is an emotion in Frida Harris's art that is different than just a traditional pip deck. I mean, I feel like there is vibrancy and life in those images that a static kind of pip deck, although I think pip decks are beautiful, a static pip deck doesn't offer. The Thoth, Lady Frida Harris's paintings for the Thoth deck really do vibrate, and they really do have energy and life. But it's not as much a mnemonic as the picture of Pamela Coleman Smith that she drew. And so we get the esoteric title on Crowley's card because, you know, in the Golden Dawn system, that makes sense. And there were Golden Dawn decks. I probably should have pulled them out. I'm not going to move this to do that, but there are I think they're oh gosh. I remember seeing pictures of the Golden Dawn. As a member of the Golden Dawn, you had to paint or draw a deck based on the original Mathers deck. I think those had the esoteric titles on them, but I can't remember. Anyway, the keyword is a mnemonic. The picture is a mnemonic. It's just a device to help you remember a version of the meaning of that card. But that's not the totality of the card. And I always say the card doesn't mean anything out of context.
And the picture doesn't mean anything, and the word keyword doesn't mean anything. It's all just about helping you, it's contributing to the overall toolkit that you have as a tarot reader. And so for me, like, my toolkit includes the picture, it includes the element, the suit, it helps me, it includes the number, if it's a minor arcana card, right? And so all of those are little pieces of information that I have. And so when I lay out the cards, I'm sort of thinking about, okay, how do these cards work together? And, you know, in my new book that I'm working on, which is, it's very much like Tarot on Earth, except it's really about using Rider-Waite-Smith style decks instead of pip decks. I mean, it's not the same book at all. I've changed since then. There's a lot that's different. But the idea that I describe is like, if you have a stopped up sink and you call a plumber has a toolkit, and they may start with Drano. And if that doesn't work, then they'll go to the snake, you know, and they'll put the drain snake in. And if that doesn't work, they'll try something else. It's a little bit like doing a puzzle. Does this piece fit here? Does this piece fit there? The plumber is trying to find the right tool that solves the stopped up sink. As a reader, we're kind of doing the same thing. Like, okay, does the picture kind of make a connection here? Does the elemental association and the keyword, the numerological association help me? You know what I mean? So there's like, it's an experiment, and a reading is really an experiment in trying different tools in partnership until something clicks. And then, you know, okay, so now this clicks based on this question, you know, and then now I have this other card here, and how does that? And you just kind of like experiment with the tools in your toolkit. The picture is just one of those. You know, the picture of the Three of Swords does, you know, we've been told it's sorrow so much that it feels sorrowful, but it is surprisingly neutral. It's a gray background, it's a Valentine heart, it's not even a human heart. There's 3 swords stuck in it, there's some clouds. Each of those things, with the exception of the swords pierced through the heart, are fairly neutral. But even that heart with the swords in it, it's not showing pain. There's no damage to the organ, as it were. You know, they've sliced through really cleanly, and the heart's still a heart. So, and it sort of connects to other religious iconography from like the Sacred Heart image. You know what I mean? If you didn't grow up Catholic, Roman Catholic, for example, and you see the image of the Sacred Heart, which is like a picture of Jesus with, you know, a heart on fire out of his chest wrapped in thorns, that would be off-putting if you don't know that it is, for Roman Catholics, an expression of their, you know, central figure, an expression of his love for humanity. But it's a jarring image if you don't understand where that's coming from, in the same way that the Three of Swords can be. So my point is that the image is just part of the thing, and so is the keyword. I would take an image over a keyword because of the way my brain works. And so it's not that I don't think tarot cards shouldn't have keywords on them. I just can't use ones that do as well because they get in the way. Those keywords get in the way. I'm so linguistic and I'm such a word nerd that I can't let go of sorrow or strife or whatever it is. And so it constricts me in a bad way. I think in tarot reading, there are good constrictions and there are bad constrictions. And a good constriction is things that sort of give you bounding boxes and help you limit the possibilities. A bad restriction or constriction is when it stops you from experimenting or using all the tools that might be available to you. So that's why I don't like keywords and why I don't mind pictures. But again, it's a personal preference, right? We're all different, and thank God. Another thing I wanted to just ramble about, and that's really what I'm doing here, is just like your evolution as a reader, you know? And I said in my Things I Wish I'd Learned Sooner video that you're always going to grow and you're always going to change and you're going to keep learning new things, and that's great. And that is the truth. And I guess, you know, I'm thinking about this week, just yesterday, I sat down with the very first book. I just put it on the shelf, should have kept it out, whatever. I sat down with the very first book I ever read or tried to read. And it was a book that I got rid of pretty quickly, and found Rachel Pollack soon after that, and I read a bunch of books since then. But it really it scared me in a way. Like, it was so something. And in reading it this weekend, and sitting with this was the first half of it. I posted a picture on Instagram. I'll try to remember to plug it in here too. The first half of it is about the minor arcana, and it really leans heavily on those esoteric titles. But actually, the descriptions of the elements and the way that her card descriptions or card meanings tie in the elements is actually really close to how I read now. And it's interesting because I couldn't see 20 years ago that 20 years later I would actually be reading very similarly to what I wasn't ready to read at that point. And that I would, have descriptions of the elements that are actually really close to what she constructed. Now, the second half of the book is on the major arcana, and it's very Kabbalistic, and I just don't read that way. And so I didn't enjoy that part of the book as much, although the way she talks about symbols and symbolism and how they work together, I thought was really good. Anyway, the point is, like, you can't know where you're going, and it's an interesting thing to say as a tarot reader, right? Because we're like all about how, what's coming down the pike. But as a learner, you never know where you're going to wind up. And I wouldn't have known back then. I mean, I never would have imagined the world we're living in now back then, to be honest. But just knowing, like I at 19 or 20 years old when I started reading, like, the idea that I would have this channel, that I would have written a book, that I would have been, to like a giant tarot conference twice, and that some of the closest people that I have in my life are tarot folks, is sort of like, you just never know where your learning journey is going to take you. And that's one reason why I feel like it's so important to try to be as open as you can to everything. Even if it like constricts you, like, or that I used that word earlier, but even if it makes you go, ooh, I don't think I like that. Sitting with why is so helpful. Just like experimenting with, like, why do I feel this way? What about this is making me not happy, or making me uncomfortable, or making me feel like, no, that's wrong. Because you can learn a lot about yourself in doing that, and you will learn a lot about yourself from doing that. So, I guess, I mean, it's sort of a thing I kind of wish I had known when I was younger as well. This idea that, like, you don't benefit yourself by closing off to something that doesn't immediately feel like there's some potential there, if that makes sense. So even if you don't like it, think about why, and don't just try not to close yourself up to another opinion or another method, because you can still learn something even if you decide that method isn't for you. Is there anything else I want to say about that? I tend to say a lot about a lot of things. I guess not. I mean, I guess that point has made itself. I thought I would venture into territory too that's maybe a little out of my purview, and what I do on this channel, which is to talk about, like, advice for deck creators. And I don't have a lot to say about that, except that I think there's only one time where deck creators should change their path based on crowd feedback. And it should happen before a deck is published. Other than that, I feel strongly that deck creators should really stick to their guns. And what I mean by this is, look, if you are creating a deck and there are people in it, and you want to have authentic representation of communities that are not your own, before you go into the world and publish your deck, however you do it, find, if you can, folks who are willing to say, this is an authentic representation of my community, of my group, of my culture. Now, not everyone in a community or a culture speaks for everyone else, but getting a little feedback on authentic representation is a good thing. And if you want to hear a much more thoughtful and put together discussion of that, I'm going to recommend two videos that I recommended in my last video. Both are by Queen Osset, and one is a walkthrough of the Relative Tarot, one is a walkthrough of the Hoodoo Tarot. In both of those situations, she discusses why authenticity in representation matters so much. And I really recommend, if you are creating a deck and you want it to have representation, that you explore those videos and listen to what she has to say. Honestly, other than that, there was a deck that is going to be released at some point soon. It was a crowdfunded deck, and it was a deck that I felt really passionate about, and still do. But the authors and artists decided, after getting some feedback, that there was too much nudity in the deck, to redo some of the cards. And to me, that is really problematic. Because they're, first of all, just generally to folks, like, we're all born naked. As RuPaul says, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. Like, we've got to start learning to see a human body, a naked human body, as something other than an object of lust or an object of shame. You know what I mean? Like, we should not, and it's so easy for me to say that, right? Because it doesn't offend me, but it's human to be naked. And throughout the history of art, you know, the naked body has been celebrated by artists. And in this particular deck, which was representing a certain kind of population, I don't want to get too specific because I don't want to say what it was, although if you know the deck, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. I think it's really problematic that, to a degree, the artists were sort of bullied into taking out something that so many of us who are the target market for this deck felt so passionately about. And in private conversations I've had with folks, they have felt erased by that change. And that's fair, you know, and I'll say that as someone who does not have a model body. Like, we seem to be far more okay with nudity when it's a model body. When it's a body like mine, or, you know, anyone who's not like a model or physically fit, that is offensive to people. And that's fucked up to me. And so I feel like, as deck creators, if your goal is to show people and to show bodies in a positive, collective, universal way, don't let people bully you into changing that. They're not the market for your deck, but someone who is that is really going to feel seen. So that's my thoughts about that. When I posted a thing on YouTube for, like, what would you like to see me do videos about during this self-isolation moment, I got a weird amount, not a weird amount, but I got a surprising amount, that's a better way to say it, of requests for my thoughts on using tarot for meditation and path working. And honestly, I'd love to talk about those things. I don't use tarot for anything other than readings. I really am not a meditator. I wish I were, but I don't have any kind of spiritual connection to tarot. And that's not to say that it's right or wrong. It's just that I don't have any spiritual connection to it. I know people who do, and I really recommend Lisa from Mindful Tarot. Her book, particularly the first half of it, I think takes you on a nice journey into using tarot for mindfulness and meditation. And she's got some great videos, and I believe she's doing some mentorships and classes as well. So I would check out her channel if you don't know her. I'm a great fan of hers and lucky enough to have met her several times, and I think she's wonderful. And it's not that I have a problem with people doing it, I just don't use tarot that way. I really am a very kind of old-fashioned, and I never thought I would say this, like, I think I'm kind of just an old-fashioned kind of fortune teller in a way. I don't have a religious connection to tarot, or a spiritual connection to it. Other than that, I believe it's a tool that we use to communicate with those entities or energies or beings or universals or whatever that we don't have a shared language with. That tarot is a shared language for us to talk to whatever out there is smarter than us, but I don't even know what that is, and I don't have a cosmology that is capable of describing it. I just know that it's there. So I don't use tarot for meditation at all, and I never have. Early in my reading life, I did do a little spell work with it, and I found that it actually was really effective, and it freaked me out a little bit, and so I haven't done much since then. And I took a class through through the tarot school on past life work, which I do think is really interesting, and I have not explored it much at all. This summer, I was working on what I thought was going to be like a booklet on kind of ancestral work for folks like me whose families don't have ancestral traditions in our history. And it was I think what I'd done a lot of research, and what I was trying to do was not pull from any particular path, because what I did not want to do was appropriate, as countless others of authors have done. What I wanted to do is create, using tarot specifically, a method for working with ancestral energy. I hate when I say energy as a thing. In order to heal family traumas, and to explore the ways that we may have, and our families may have, contributed to kind of a universal shadow. And as I was working on it, it was a really interesting summer. There was a lot of conversations happening, and I decided that the timing wasn't right for me to put that out into the world. And I may do something with it, because I did do a fair amount of research into inherited trauma, which you should read about if you are interested at all. Oh God, I think it's Dr. Rachel Yehuda in New York, who's done a lot of work with ancestral trauma in relationship to Holocaust survivors. And there's evidence that that trauma impacts and changes the shape of people's DNA, and those traumas actually are passed down. And I've read a lot of stuff about that. I'm not a therapist, so it wasn't about sort of therapy, but it was about exploring generational moments and their impacts on your existence in modern life. And so I didn't finish it, and I didn't put it out into the world because I felt like the timing wasn't right, but I also felt like it wasn't really my place to do what I was doing, and so I stopped. But I may find some way that feels appropriate for me to make the research that I did and the spreads I came up with available in some way. But I'm not ready for that yet. But so that's really all I've ever done with tarot besides reading. So it's hard for me to talk about tarot for meditation. Is there anything else that was on my little old list? I don't think so. I think that was it. So really I really just wanted to make a video and like put something out for people to listen to and to think about. I mean, I'm thinking back on what I've been talking about. Like, these are such disparate ideas, and this will probably not be one of my more popular videos, but I have a couple other ideas that I'm going to film today too. So I just want to sort of put out content for folks to distract themselves with. And this is one of them. So just a little ramble on random topics. Happy Halloween. Be good.